The cold slapped my face as I slid onto the ski trail and stopped dead. In full daylight, the slope looked destroyed. Deep ruts cut across the snow. Packed berms were smashed flat. Every warning stake I'd set was gone. Then I heard laughing. Logan Mercer, the HOA president's son, stood halfway down the ski run with 4 of his friends. Shovels, ski poles, boots grinding into the snow. They were carving grooves across the trail, piling loose snow into uneven ridges, tearing down reflective tape like it was a prank. "Careful, Caleb," Logan yelled, loud and smug. "This trail's dangerous now." Behind me, skiers tried to slow. One slid sideways and crashed. Another hit one of the ruts hard, tumbled, and stayed down. People shouted. Someone dropped their skis. The entire run froze in panic. I started toward them when an SUV rolled up by the access gate. Diane Mercer stepped out, clipboard under her arm, already in charge. She didn't look at the wrecked ski trail. She didn't check on the people her son had just hurt. She stared straight at me. "That's enough," she said. "The HOA is shutting this ski trail down today." What she didn't know, what she hadn't bothered to ask, was who her son had just injured on that slope. Diane Mercer didn't wait for permission. Within an hour, orange barricades were dragged across the access point, bright against the white snow. HOA signs went up fast. Trail closed. Unsafe conditions. By order of Pinecrest Ridge Association. She supervised every inch of it like she owned the ground beneath her boots. Logan stood a few steps behind her, arms crossed, a crooked smile still on his face. He didn't look worried. He looked entertained. Every time someone tried to argue, he smirked and glanced at his mother, like he already knew how this would end. "This is about community safety," Diane said, projecting her voice so the small crowd could hear. "We're preventing further incidents." I stepped closer. "You don't have the authority to shut this down." She finally turned to me, eyes cold. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Caleb. Anyone who ignores HOA orders will face penalties." She tapped her clipboard. "Heavy ones." Someone behind me muttered that this was private land. "That's irrelevant," Diane snapped. "This trail affects HOA residents. That gives us jurisdiction." "It doesn't," I said. "This ski trail sits entirely on my property." She waved that away with a single dismissive motion, like swatting at a fly. "Ownership doesn't override responsibility. If someone else gets hurt, that's on you." Logan let out a quiet laugh. Diane leaned in just enough for me to hear her next words. "We're done asking. From this point on, we enforce." And the way she said it made one thing clear: she wasn't trying to solve a problem. She was claiming control. Logan didn't stop after the barricades went up. The very next morning, he came back, same group, same attitude, like the slope was a stage, and they were putting on a repeat performance. They cut around the barriers through the trees and stepped straight onto the ski trail, boots crunching into fresh powder I'd groomed hours earlier. I watched Logan drive a shovel into the packed edge of the run and peel it back in slabs. One of his friends dragged a ski pole sideways, carving a deep groove across the fall line, the exact spot where skiers naturally picked up speed. Another kicked loose snow into uneven piles, turning a smooth descent into a trap. "Get off my trail," I yelled. Logan looked up and smiled. "Relax, Caleb. We're fixing it. Fixing doesn't look like this." End 5. He shrugged, unfazed, then noticed my phone raised to record. His smile twitched. He muttered something, and the group backed off together, laughing as they disappeared into the trees like this was all part of the plan. 10 minutes later, 2 HOA volunteers showed up carrying Diane's signs. They didn't ask questions. They didn't inspect the damage. They zip-tied trail close notices to my fence posts on my property, then told me to take it up with the board. Imanos. That's when I realized what was happening. Logan caused the damage. Diane labeled it unsafe. And suddenly, I was the irresponsible one, refusing to cooperate. Skiers showed up, saw the barricades and the torn snow, and turned around assuming I'd lost control of my own land. No citations yet, no inspectors. Just a shove, disguised as concern. 2 days later, the shove turned into paperwork. A certified letter arrived from the Pinecrest Ridge Association, written like I was a member under their authority. It listed unauthorized recreational access, safety violations, and a new enforcement rule passed by emergency board vote. Then came the fines. Any HOA resident caught using the ski trail would face penalties in the mid-5 figures, escalating with each violation. They called it deterrence. They even included a payment link. Within hours, the outside pressure started. A county voicemail about unsafe conditions. An email referencing public endangerment. A follow-up call asking whether I was operating a recreational facility. It wasn't coincidence. Diane had gone wide, weaponizing agencies to box me in. If she couldn't force me to close the trail directly, she'd make it painful enough that I'd do it myself. That night, the HOA held a special meeting. I stood in the back while Diane sat at the front, calm and rehearsed. "This is about preventing further injuries," she said. "The trail owner has refused reasonable safety controls." Someone asked what caused the injuries. Diane didn't answer. She pivoted. "We're acting responsibly." I understood the strategy then. If she could make me the villain publicly, the community would do the rest. People would pressure me. The trail would die quietly. Diane would claim victory without ever stepping into court. Logan sat 2 rows over, arms stretched across empty chairs, watching me like this was already over. I stopped arguing and started collecting proof. That night, I installed 2 trail cameras, small, discreet, pointed at the access points Logan favored. No speeches, no warnings, just patience. The next afternoon, the footage caught everything. Logan and his friends walked past the HOA's own closure signs and went straight onto the run. Logan carried a shovel. Another kid carried a drill. They pulled out my reflective stakes, snapped them, and tossed them into the brush. They scraped away the packed slowdown zone, then piled loose snow into a mound that would collapse under weight. One dragged a branch across the slope to hide a groove. It wasn't messing around. It was deliberate sabotage. I printed still frames, faces, timestamps, clear actions, and went straight to Diane, expecting denial or panic. She showed neither. She glanced at the photos and said, "Young men make mistakes." "This isn't a mistake," I said. "It's intentional." Her eyes hardened. "If you share that footage, you'll regret it." That was the moment it clicked. She wasn't protecting her son. She was using him. I left, shaking, already planning to take the evidence higher when my phone buzzed. A neighbor texted, "Someone got hurt on the ski trail." Ambulance came. I drove to the clinic expecting a stranger. Instead, I saw Elliot Ward sitting on the exam table, jacket folded neatly beside him, one arm in a sling. Calm, focused, controlled. My guest, the one person I'd invited out here for quiet and snow and a clean run. "You were on the trail?" I asked. He nodded once. I was. And in that moment, everything shifted because Diane didn't just cross a line with me or the neighborhood. Her son had hurt my guest. And from the look in Elliot's eyes, I knew this wasn't going to end with another HOA letter. The sheriff's deputy didn't need much convincing. He stood at the base of the ski trail with his notebook open, eyes moving between the torn snow, the snapped stakes, and the photos on my phone. He didn't interrupt while I explained. He didn't offer opinions. He just asked one question at the end. "How long has this been happening?" "Days," I said. "Always the same people." He nodded once. "That matters." Word spread fast after that. Not rumors, facts. The deputy spoke with 2 other people who'd gone down on the trail. He marked the damaged sections. He took statements. For the first time since Diane showed up with her clipboard, the situation stopped being a disagreement and started looking like something else. Still, Diane didn't back off. That afternoon, I went to check on Elliot. He was sitting upright now, jacket on, sling adjusted neatly, like he'd already decided he was done being sidelined. He didn't complain. He didn't dramatize what happened. He just asked clear, precise questions. "Has the damage been documented?" "Yes." "Do you have timestamps?" "I do." "Witnesses?" "Multiple." He listened without interrupting, then looked up at me with that same steady calm I'd seen when he first arrived in town. "You're being boxed in," he said, administratively. Socially, I exhaled. "That's exactly what it feels like." He nodded. "Then you don't argue your way out. You change the frame." I studied him. "You sound like you've done this before." Don't fur die using." All rested. A faint smile crossed his face. More than once. That's when he said it quiet, deliberate. "If you want this to end permanently, I can help you." I hesitated. "I don't want favors." "This isn't a favor," he said. "This is about stopping an abuse of power before it spreads." He didn't name his position. He didn't threaten anyone. He simply laid out steps, how to preserve evidence, how to force disclosures, how to make sure this didn't stay an HOA issue. Listening to him, I realized 2 things at the same time. First, Elliot knew the system from the inside. Second, Diane had no idea who she'd tangled with. That night, county officials returned this time not for safety, but for documentation. They photographed the slope, they logged dates, They confirmed that the trail sat entirely on my property. By evening, Diane's emails started changing tone. Less confident, more legal. She wasn't done, but she felt the pressure. I closed the ski trail the next morning, not because Diane told me to, not because the HOA demanded it. I did it because the trail wasn't safe anymore, and because leaving it open gave Diane cover. I posted a single notice at the access point. Trail closed by property owner pending safety review. That distinction mattered. The reaction was immediate. My phone lit up with calls and messages. Parents angry, skiers frustrated, a few accusing me of giving in, others begging me to reopen it just for the weekend. I told them all the same thing. I won't reopen it until the sabotage stops. That's when the community turned not on me, but on the HOA. People started asking questions Diane couldn't dodge. Why were HOA signs posted on private land? Why was Logan seen on the trail after it was closed? Why were there no inspections before the ban? By noon, Diane announced an emergency HOA meeting. The notice went out marked mandatory attendance. She was trying to regain control before the narrative solidified. The meeting was scheduled for the community hall. Middle of the day, snow still falling outside. When I arrived, the room was already packed. Not just HOA members, non-members, skiers, neighbors who'd never attended a meeting before in their lives. Diane stood at the front, jaw tight, gavel in hand. This meeting is to address escalating safety concerns caused by reckless land use, she said, eyes locked on me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She talked for 10 minutes straight about liability, about order, about how personal property decisions could impact everyone. She painted herself as the last barrier between chaos and community harm. Then she made her mistake. She said, "We have taken every reasonable step to prevent injuries." That's when Elliot stood up. Not dramatically, not angrily, just calmly, one smooth motion from his seat near the aisle. "Madam President," he said evenly. "That statement is inaccurate." The room went silent. Diane turned toward him, clearly annoyed. "Sir, this meeting is for HOA members only." Elliot didn't argue. He didn't sit back down. He looked around the room instead, at the faces, the tension, the snow pressing against the windows. "My name is Elliot Ward," he said, "and I was injured on that ski trail." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Diane's expression flickered just a crack, but she recovered quickly. "I'm sorry to hear that, but, Elliot continued, "my injury did not result from neglect. It resulted from deliberate interference." I stepped forward then, holding my phone. The video played on the screen behind the board table. Logan, the shovel, the snapped stakes, the dragged branch. Every movement clear, every timestamp visible. Gasps, shouts. Someone swore out loud. Diane spun toward her son. "Logan, what is this?" Logan didn't answer. Elliot spoke again, voice calm, unraised. "Sabotaging a recreational trail after ordering its closure is not safety enforcement. It's deception." He paused, then added the sentence that changed everything. "I am a senior federal judge, and this matter will not remain internal." The room froze. Diane's gavel slipped from her hand and clattered onto the table. Logan was escorted out by 2 officers who had quietly entered through the side door. Diane followed, protesting, demanding explanations, her authority dissolving with every step. And standing there, watching the HOA's power collapse in real time, I understood something clearly for the first time since this started. Closing the trail hadn't been surrender. It had been the move that forced the truth into daylight. The room was already charged when the doors closed. Snow pressed against the tall windows of the community hall. Daylight bleaching the world outside while everything inside felt tight and airless. Every chair was filled. People stood along the walls. Diane Mercer took the floor like she still believed volume could substitute for authority. "This situation escalated because the trail owner refused cooperation," she said, voice sharp, gavel tapping for attention. "The HOA acted to prevent further incidents." She didn't look at Logan. She didn't look at the people who'd been hurt. She talked past them, policy, liability, order trying to drown the room in procedure. I stayed silent. That bothered her. "Caleb Rowan," she said, pointing, "you unilaterally closed a community resource." Before I could answer, movement rippled near the aisle. A few unfamiliar faces stood quiet, alert, not HOA, not residents, just there. Diane noticed them and frowned. "This meeting is not open to—" "That won't be necessary," a calm voice said. Elliot rose from his seat, not angry, not loud, just steady. "I was injured on that ski trail," Elliot said, turning so the room could see him. And I'm here because the explanation I was given does not match the facts. Murmurs spread. Diane tried to interrupt, but Elliot continued, unfazed. The damage was not accidental. It was created. I stepped forward and connected my phone to the projector. The video filled the wall. Logan on the slope, the shovel peeling back packed snow, reflective stakes snapped and tossed aside. A branch dragged across the run to hide a groove. No commentary, no narration, just truth, playing out frame by frame. Gasps cut through the room. Someone shouted Logan's name. Diane's face drained of color as the footage looped back to the beginning. That's not... She started. Elliot raised one hand. She stopped. Ordering a closure, then allowing Sabotage to justify it, is not enforcement, he said. It's concealment. He paused, letting the silence work. My name is Elliot Ward, he continued. I serve as a senior federal judge. The room locked up. Every whisper died. Diane laughed once, thin, brittle. That doesn't give you authority here. Elliot didn't argue. Two officers stepped forward from the side entrance. Quiet, professional. Logan Mercer, one said. We need to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation. Logan stood halfway, eyes darting to his mother. Mom, Diane rushed toward them. You can't do this. This is an HOA matter. Elliot's voice cut clean through the noise. It ceased being an HOA matter the moment deliberate interference caused injury. Logan was escorted out. No handcuffs, no spectacle, just the sound of boots on tile and a door closing behind him. Diane turned back to the room, scrambling. This meeting is adjourned. It is not, Elliot said. One of the officers addressed the board. Effective immediately, all HOA enforcement actions related to the ski trail are suspended pending review. Where Mazin, the gavel slipped from Diane's hand and hit the table with a hollow crack. She stood there, suddenly small, as her authority evaporated in front of everyone she tried to control. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just watched the power she'd wielded so casually collapse right where she'd insisted it belonged. No one rushed the exit after the meeting ended. The room felt different, lighter, but stunned, like a storm had passed and nobody trusted the silence yet. People stood in small clusters, voices low, eyes flicking toward the doors where Logan had been taken out. A few neighbors approached me cautiously, like they weren't sure which version of me they'd find. One apologized for assuming I'd let the trail fall apart. Another admitted they'd complained because it was easier than pushing back on the HOA. Someone else just shook my hand and said, "You were right to shut it down." Outside the windows, snow kept falling, steady and clean, erasing the footprints from earlier chaos. For the first time in days, I wasn't bracing for the next accusation. I could stand still without feeling watched. The anger in the room drained out and left something quieter behind it. Relief, mixed with embarrassment, mixed with gratitude that someone had finally drawn a hard line. My phone buzzed while I was still standing there. I put it on speaker without thinking. The county attorney's voice filled the room, calm and unmistakably formal. Charges related to deliberate trail sabotage and obstruction were being referred upward. HOA enforcement actions tied to the ski trail were frozen pending review. A compliance monitor would oversee Pinecrest Ridge Association until further notice. No speeches, no drama, just facts, delivered cleanly. Elliot nodded once as he listened, like this was exactly where the process was supposed to land. Someone from the board asked what happened next. The answer was simple. Investigations, depositions, consequences. No more emergency rules. No more fines pulled out of thin air. Any future action touching private land would require third-party review and documented consent. Diane didn't speak. She sat rigid, staring straight ahead as if authority might reappear if she refused to acknowledge its absence. We stepped outside together when the calls stopped. The daylight had softened, the snow turning the whole mountain quiet again. Elliot adjusted his coat and looked up the slope, where the ski trail curved cleanly between the trees closed, but intact. You did the right thing, he said, not as praise, but as confirmation. I told him the trail would reopen once it was safe and protected for good. He smiled faintly. I'll be back when it does. No announcements, no ceremony, just a promise that felt heavier than any HOA rule. I stayed there after everyone else drifted away, boots planted in fresh snow, listening to the mountains settle. The trail wasn't a weapon anymore. It wasn't leverage. It was just what it had always been, a place people came to breathe, move, and belong without asking permission. In the daylight, with the snow falling clean again, control finally gave way to something stronger: ownership without fear. Looking back, the win wasn't what mattered most. What sticks with me is how easily this could have gone the other way if I'd let anger steer the wheel. In the middle of it, every instinct told me to push harder, louder, faster. But what actually changed the outcome wasn't volume or stubbornness. It was patience, documentation, and letting the process do what it's meant to do. If I'd cut corners or reacted emotionally, the story would have ended very differently, and not in a good way. There's a clear line I didn't understand until I was forced to walk it. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean swinging back with the same force that hit you. It means choosing restraint when escalation feels justified. The moment frustration turns into reckless action, you hand your credibility away. What held up under pressure wasn't my temper, it was evidence, timelines, and staying inside the rules, even when the other side didn't. If there's anything worth sharing from this, it's simple and grounded. Keep records when something feels off. Save messages, take photos. Pay attention to public notices and filings that affect your property or your community. When a situation starts involving authority or money or safety, that's usually the point where outside eyes matter. Not as a threat, just as a stabilizer. Calm steps, taken early, have a way of shrinking problems before they harden into something permanent. At the end of it all, what I wanted wasn't payback. It was quiet. Communities work when rules are respected and power stays accountable. When it isn't, small places fracture fast. That ski trail still cuts through the mountain the same way it always did, clean, open, ordinary. And that's the point. When the law holds, shared spaces stay shared, and no one has to be afraid just to belong.